Good day, everybody. Welcome to the Deal Scout. On today's show, we're going to have a conversation with Carl Cox. He likes to focus on private equity groups, turnarounds, and scaling companies. Carl, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Josh. It's a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, man. Good to see you. So behind you is a huge bookshelf, and I see the 10X Rule, Extreme Ownership, Good to Great, all the books that and Outliers. Great books. So before we dive too big into the interview here, right? You're getting ready to go work with a private equity group, and you can only grab one of these books to bring with you. Which book are you going to put in your briefcase? Oh, he's pulling a book off the shelf. The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, right?
Yep. Yes, sir. Yep. No,
Awesome.
it's the book because especially in turnaround situations, you're there for a reason, and it's typically because people, process, or systems have been holding you back for too long, and you haven't been able to make the tough decisions to go there. Ben Horowitz does a great job in that book of describing the really difficult, the hard thing about hard things of when you're a CEO.
Ooh.
And that's who I really work with the most, is the CEOs, because CEOs are, as you know, are the most difficult. They get sometimes too much praise, but this is the reality. They get very little praise, right? So a good CEO will say thank you to everyone else working around me. When the blame happens, it comes to them. Mm-hmm. And they also cannot talk about everything. You know, they cannot share all their concerns. They can't share all their fears. They can't share all the difficult things that are happening. They can't talk about the person that was a superstar when they were a $25 million company, but is struggling at a $75 million company. And so what I help do is help them reveal the truth that they often already know, but sometimes can't fully see. And when they can fully see it truly, then they're able and more likely to make sometimes those difficult decisions. And this isn't always getting rid of people, just to clarify that. That's not what I mean here. It's putting people in the right, as good to great. Jim Collins says, sometimes it's just putting the right people in the right seat in the bus. And just because, once again, somebody's a VP of sales at a $10 million company doesn't mean they're going to thrive at a $50 million company, because of the need and who you're selling to and the different areas behind it. So those are the things I help bring to light and create a plan around it, right? Because often the other part is, it just seems like such trial and tribulations, but it doesn't have to be that way. You could plan these accordingly and have it be successful and a win-win for actually all parties involved. It's just people have the fear of God that they don't want to move beyond where they're at, right? Because once again, they might have known somebody for 10, 15 years, right? And they're unwilling to make those tough decisions. So that's the core of what I do. And I love it. I love helping people out. And I don't come in, there's some people who come in with the approach of, just slash and burn, or it's like, you got to learn, and if you aren't learning about what's taking place and happening, you might be there are probably hidden gems within your own organization that have been covered up just due to the way the organization has operated for so long. And if you ask the right questions and you help understand who they are, you're more likely to put them in place to be more successful. And that's what's super fun. I think the only difficult people are the people who are like, they're not in a learning state and they've got a fixed mindset. That's hard to deal with, when they're just like, I'm done, I'm not going to move forward. It's like, well, hey, especially in private equity, where I think there's such misunderstanding that people get the money and they think they're done. And they got to understand that, here, I'll pull my accounting finance background. Okay. There's a reason why equity is on the same side as liabilities. Assets equals liabilities equals owner's equity. So whenever you raise money for somebody, that is initially a long-term liability, becomes a short-term liability when they want to resell your company. So when you don't think that way, when you think you own it, you've already lost. You have an obligation and a duty to actually increase the value, because you took money from somebody else who expects that money to get a level of return. And whenever we are audacious and are arrogant to think that it's ours, relook at it. Unless it's your own cash, you don't own it, right? And you have an obligation to give back. And there's this like, oh, well, it's just rich people. That's not always true. It's people's pensions. It's people's retirements. You could have a teacher's organization that's going into it. It's not just, there's this mindset of sometimes, oh, it's just a few rich people. That is not true. And even if it is, it doesn't matter. You have set an obligation when you've taken somebody else's money in any round, seed money, you know, A round, B round, whatever it is, you have an obligation to return it and make it greater. And I think, interestingly enough, Josh, where people make the wicked worst mistake is when they set these projections they'll never hit. And the sad part is they often end up losing their job because they lied to get the money. They couldn't hit it to begin with. They thought they had to say something to do something. And they didn't come in with the sense of, I need help. They were just, I just need the cash and I'll do whatever it takes. And often that's when I see is the management who doesn't hang around, because they didn't come in with authenticity and genuineness. They came in with this, I did it. It's like, no, you just started. You just started. I don't care if you've been around for 20 years. If you took someone else's money, it's no different than a bank's money, right? We all know we have to pay back the bank. You have to pay back your owners. And by the way, this even goes if you're a 100% owner company, you have a fiduciary responsibility to raise the value because it's going to go to somebody else, legacy heir, something of that difference. Yeah. It's not intended for you to foolishly give away the money. So Josh, you're just smiling and laughing and let me go. But I mean, I talk about things I'm passionate about, is passionate about people who raise money for the wrong reason and foolish enough to think that they don't have to do the right things to actually help make things work.
Yeah. So I think private equity in the past has gotten, right, past and present, you know, sometimes have gotten the message, right? The wrong, image out there of, private equity company comes in, makes all these tough decisions, flips everybody on their heads, gets rid of everybody, puts scale systems process in, turns a burn and then sells the company, right? When you work with a group, what do you see a good PE group do versus maybe one that's damaging? What do you see are some differences for good versus the bad?
Well, I think it is important, just like every company is different. Every private equity company is different. Yeah. It has its own set of investors and its own set of values, and they're going to do things a certain way. And so I like to work with people that have a little bit longer term mindset, because I think they'll get the greatest reward. That's just my own personal approach behind things. It's not, sometimes I get brought in when it's like at the 11th and a half hour, right? And it's like, they're done, they're like done with what's happening. They've tried everything that's happened to date to be be successful. But once again, I think it's very important when you're considering a private equity company, you should be dating them in the early part of the process and talk to them about what they've done with other organizations and actually get references and talk with how they really dealt with when times were in trouble. That's what I've done when I've talked with them, whether once again, I'm working from directly or I had to get private equity money in the past, help be a part of that process. You gotta do your own homework ahead of time. Because once again, I mentioned you have now an obligation, right? Yeah. As soon as you take that money on board. And yeah, how it is, there's always this fun press release. And when it takes place, it's like, I'm not sure if you should even post that, because all you've done is you've set a timeline for when there's an expectation for when you're going to return money. And so, anyways, that's what I see around that, Josh, is I think you have to do your research. You have to find out what is the process for how they have change management. I think it's, because there's some PE companies that come in, they buy and they're like, they see an opportunity that the ownership can't see. It's more better aligned when the ownership sees the opportunity and they see the need for their additional financing to get it through private equity versus getting traditional banking financing. Right. And they do that because they know they can get a greater return, and they realize they're going to create more value by having less ownership. Right. They're willing to give up to get more. Yeah. And those people who have that mindset are the right ones to be investing in private equity in the first place. And they should be investing with those who have that same mindset. Your lead investor, and that is the most important thing. The follow-ons are a little less important, but you got to be careful, because the second, third, or fourth ones, they can get enough power, and take care of everything. Like, and by the way, that independent board seat, you better really care about that independent board seat. That's with it. A little small note to there. Anybody who's been on a board and been with private equity, you better make sure you have a good independent board seat.
Yeah, that's a good one. How did you get started in this world? Like walk us through some of your past, how did you get to this place where you're working with these kind of groups?
Um, so most of my career has been within companies doing it. So, I was with one company early on that had a private equity company out of Texas, and we grew substantially, and then had the dot-com bubble, right? And that was interesting. I was with another company that became public, and we went through that whole experience. And so 5 years I was with a publicly traded company. And by the way, publicly traded companies, people always think, oh, it's just public. Well, they're doing as much dancing with private equity companies, and other people are investing in institutional investors, right, to make sure that they stay. So there's a whole game there. Next organization, actually, interesting enough, was a private company, but we were constantly figuring out how we were going to get our value. We ended up becoming an ESOP company. So I had this very interesting experience with an ESOP company, and actually, which just recently became 100%. So I got this wonderful paycheck, a little early Christmas gift as a result of that experience I had. Had another experience, let's see here, with a privately held company that we grew from 70 employees to 450 employees in 3 years. And we were looking at, once again, getting whether we should get acquired, we were talking with different people, ultimately ended up selling after I left, sold to another company where they took ownership of that company. I invested in companies as well. So where we became a strategic corporate investment. And so I became the board member of those different companies. Another company I was with, I opened up the US company for an Australian-based software company. And in that company, we grew from, I think it was 50 clients to 350 clients, became 50% of the global business. And right after that was primarily self-funded. And then we ended up getting a Series A right after I left with that company, with some key investors out of Australia. So I've had a lot of experiences in kind of seeing the whole picture. And I've always had this finance hat that I've had. And then I've played a CEO role and multiple different roles around it. So I don't want to say I'm an expert in this and how I ended up getting this. So yeah, I asked how to get into the private equity part. It was through people were looking to have help. There were some companies that were struggling, and they knew my experience of doing it from within. And they were like, can you help us out? And so that has helped me get in this path of helping out with private equity companies, because we have a common mindset, right? I'm working with, I love it, wicked smart people, right? That they know what they're doing. Often the companies I'm working with are really smart as well, but they're stuck once again for one to multiple reasons. And so that's what led me to here. And I love it. I love helping organizations get unstuck and get to the point where they can grow again.
Yeah. Now, as you're working with a group, what are the things that you usually sniff out before, anybody else or nobody else is capable of doing it? Like when you start looking at a business, you're looking at their books, you're talking to the CEO, you're kind of looking at the business, they called you in for help and you're looking, what do you typically find that other people's overlook?
They don't have a plan. And that's a plan. So let's just, for argument's sake, say you get in with a company and they're a $20 million company and they want to become a $100 million company. I'm just doing simple things.
Yeah.
That's not a plan. Okay. It's not a plan to say we're going to become a $100 million company. That's just a goal. It's a big, hairy, audacious goal, which I love, but a plan is figuring out really who you're going to be in the future. And then B, how you're going to get there. That's a strategy. Strategies is a collection of, of hows. This is how we're going to get to these different areas. And then this is how we're going to measure success to get there. And so I typically see there's no clear plan on to get there. The part that's missing the most, Josh, that I think is the worst part, is most people focus when it comes to their measures and how they measure success in business. They're measuring the lagging indicators. You'll go back to that 100 million, right? Okay. And by the way, if you're working with any private equity company, of course they're caring about EBITDA, right? Like that's their number one thing. They're going to look at EBITDA and results, and you better hit it. But what people miss is, unless you work on the things to get to positive EBITDA or to the right EBITDA goal, you won't actually get there. And it's all of a sudden like it's because why? EBITDA is the end result of all the things that happen up above it. And so what I like to work on with them is ask the questions, how do we actually achieve that? And how is it different from what we're doing today? And then from there, let's focus on the things that are really working, Pareto principle, right? That's means for those who aren't familiar with the Pareto principle, it's 20% of your activities typically have an impact on 80% of your results.
Yep.
So we focus on the most important things. We get rid of the things that don't matter, meaning you're probably selling to people you shouldn't be. You have lost leaders. You have things that you think doing, things you're doing you shouldn't be doing. You have some pet projects you need to stop doing. So that's a keep, start, stop process that we like to work on with our clients. Keep doing the things that are working. Start doing the things you're talking about that are now strategic. And you better stop doing the things that are a waste of time and where you're actually losing real money on. So that's what people are missing, is they're missing a plan and a rigorous process to review the results on a consistent basis and holding people accountable. These are primarily on the business activities, not just in the business, right? But we have to carve out and even change our in the business activities because we're too busy. And I think it's 90+% of people who say, why do they do strategic plans? Because they're too busy. You're too busy doing the wrong things, right? In a leadership role. That's why I shouldn't be touting my Trey Taylor's book that CEO only does 3 things, but that's, when you focus on the business activities that you should as a CEO, you should not be wasting your time on everything. I think that is the hardest part. Once again, I work with wicked smart, incredibly smart. Sorry, the wicked comes from Boston, it's from originally. But work with incredibly smart people, and that's almost a detriment at times. It's a detriment when you think you could get everything done, because then all of a sudden you feel like you're the only one that could go to answer all the questions. And the collective soul and the collective intelligence of all the people, including your private equity firm, which should hopefully provide you good insights. And why should we care about them? Because they've done it before, meaning not your business, but they've probably had success in turning and growing around another company in the past. Yeah. It's just, the difference is that you can't do the same solution to 2 identical companies because the people are different. Right. And so people come in and thinking, oh, I'm just going to come and do the same thing. Well, you have a completely different talent set, a different culture set. You cannot just go, oh, it's going to be the same company as it was before, because it's a different company based on the humans that are within it, the spirit and the soul of the company. And the more you can get that defined and add people and collect that are towards it, not just, oh, we're going to grow. No, we're going to grow. That's consistent with who we want to be. And then you're going to resonate. And then all these hiring problems that people are having, you don't have as many hiring problems because you're actually finding people that match your DNA. Right? Or you could get them at least to change their behaviors to match your DNA. So anyways, it's all, once again, people, process, and systems. We have to be working them consistently on a regular basis. Whenever somebody comes in with, I got the one silver bullet, that means I'm going to hire them on a tactic to solve. Right? So a lot of people are like, oh, we had a sales problem. Great. Okay. Maybe they're a wizard on digital marketing. Great. That's a single tactic in an entire business. That is not necessarily the solution for all companies.
Totally. Yeah. So your company, what's the name of your business?
40 Strategy. Yeah.
Okay. What's the meaning behind that? What are some of the thoughts that, as you were creating names and, walking through building your own thing, how did that form?
So it was interesting. I saw the statistic and it kind of blew me away. And it was consistent with my previous experiences working with strategic planning. Once again, as you could tell, I've been very fortunate to be part of multiple companies that have grown successfully. And so for me, it's normal. And so when I was with Cascade Strategy, all of a sudden found a few companies that worked really well, like Johnson & Johnson. They were incredible with strategic planning and execution. But then I found most companies were struggling. And I was like, well, why are they struggling so bad? And then I found out that there was a stat that showed that only 2% companies only spend 2% of their time on strategy, which is the equivalent of 40 hours. So that's where the first title of 40 Strategy came from. 40 was, hey, look, if you're going to spend 40 hours, why don't you hire an expert who's done this more than once on strategic planning and execution to help make sure you're going to get 3x the return that you would on your own. And so that was the core title of 40 Strategy. Now, the other title of 40 is the personal side, is that there is no overnight success. Okay. And, you know, from a perspective on whether it's the 40 days of struggle, the 40 years of struggle, some of these like biblical principles and stories historically that we can go back and go, what was this? You know, we have to often, I see for organizations, they have to go through struggle and toil. And maybe that's so much why I like the hard thing about hard things, is because this overnight success that we finally see on a magazine or a post, it's because they struggled for 10 years over learning and striving and getting through everything. So that's part of it's two things. One is we got to at least do 40 hours a year, right? Collectively as a team on strategy. That's number one, and do it well. And number two is, hey, look, if you're hiring me because you think this is easy, please don't hire me, because you're going to have to go through some difficult change. And there's a reason why we're stuck, right? And so we're going to help you get there. And once again, even if you're being successful, doubling is not easy. Tripling is not easy. And so you're going to have to even with a successful company, you're going to have to go through drastic changes. And as I said, you know, somebody who's successful at $10 million company is not necessarily going to be your superstar stud at $50 million company. And it's okay to recognize that. I think one of the Netflix, the concept at Reed Hastings, he talks about, you should talk about it in terms of a team, not a family. In a team, if you are moving up the levels from 6th grade basketball to junior varsity to varsity high school to small college to college and to professional, very few of those people will make it up all the way to the top, but they're going to be really, really good. You might be an awesome 8th grade basketball player, but all of a sudden when you realize you're 5'8" and you're pretty slow and you have a pretty poor shot, you know, your hustle in 8th grade is not going to help you become an NBA basketball player. Yeah. Right. And so you have to recognize it. You have to change out, be willing to have the confidence to change out to the right professionals or people who are willing to grow and change their behaviors to be successful in the future, to help get towards there, because otherwise you won't. And so I help people understand it's a team. Even if you have a family, you still should still view themselves as a team, right? Yeah. That's the only honest thing to do.
Hey, this is a softball pitch question, right? So we have a family-run organization, a family business, right? Where could things go wrong when it comes to we want to grow and scale? And
you just nailed it. I mean, it's because I mean it's hard to fire your brother, right? It's hard to fire your uncle. It's hard to fire your cousin. It's hard to fire your son, you know, or it's hard to put them in a different role, because you also are having, where this is being recorded right after Thanksgiving weekend, because you're hoping to have Thanksgiving meal with them next year again, right? Yeah. Or this upcoming year. So that is the hard thing, right? Is because how difficult is it to have an open and honest conversation where they're your blood and you can't maybe even fire them. But I've seen it. You know, I've seen people had to make those tough decisions. And by the way, those are the healthier family companies I've worked with, that they've had the maturity. Honestly, they've had the maturity to go, let's put you in the right place in the bus to fit in the future. Versus, how do I say this? When you have a family member on as a part of a company that's not pulling their weight, I know you love them. But the problem is everyone else in the company who is not a family member is frustrated by the person that's lagging the company back. Mm-hmm. And so you as a family member have a duty and obligation to be truthful and open the eyes of that person to either step up their game and learn new behaviors and approaches, or to step aside gracefully and get in a different role to help out the organization better. That is not easy.
That's not easy. No,
it's not easy at all.
I'm working with a company who, you know, few founders, they built it up, and it's outgrown, you know, yeah, some of the players, but you know, these people have built this thing together and it's become successful, but it's getting to a point where it's outgrowing them. And I was just having a conversation with the CEO, and it's some tough decisions are coming up, and those are hard, especially when they're friends, especially when they've, you know, been building for a long time together.
But Josh, nothing's more hard than staying with it. Like meaning the pain. See, this is, yeah, it's better. I was just actually, we just did a presentation, a group I'm involved with, and we had a state attorney that did a great, just said, it's better to fight now than later.
Mm.
And it's great advice, right? Because
Yeah.
the fight's going to happen. And this had to do with about state, stuff of like, you may as well argue about who's going to get what if you're, dealing with the uncomfortable part of like somebody's going to die in the future, which we all are, right?
Yeah.
But then there's the reality of the company, the business. So it's better to fight now than later. And hopefully you could still play golf down the road and still still have Thanksgiving together if you're truly family.
Well, I like this. It's better to fight now than later because I mean, we kind of all know it. Like you said, you help CEOs kind of uncover the things that they probably know and probably are overlooking a little bit. So how do you build that trust? You're getting brought in to help. How do you build that trust where you could speak to the CEO and go, hey man, here's some things that are on the table, take it or leave it, this is what I see. How do you build that trust?
That's a great question. I think I do. Well, what I hear people say, and my wife wouldn't necessarily agree with this. But at least I do it better in a business sense, is I do a pretty good job of listening when I'm with them and understanding what they're good at and hearing their concerns and with the company. And then when you get to the process of building a plan and hearing their strengths, once again, everyone who's got to there, they got there for a reason and they've done something well. And so giving them credit and acknowledgement for what they've accomplished so far should be done. Mm-hmm. And that's why, once again, I like to then take the next step of how can we do this together right in the future? Mm. Not just me. It's not me. Because every situation going on, it's like, I'm not doing the work. This is, I'm helping you to be successful. Right. And I'm helping to guide you. And this is, once again, that's why it's just 40 hours. It's not intended to be 5,000 hours. Now, I'm not saying I don't work with engagements longer than that, but often it's guidance right along the way and listening and helping them make the right decisions. And then being them with them after, if you may, the facilitation, after the strategy call, and hear the real truth, because people aren't always fully truthful and transparent in the meetings. And you have to be willing. The other part is you have to be willing to talk to, ideally, with other people in the organization as well. One of the things I love to do is strengths finder.
Yeah.
And I like to understand people's true strengths. Why? Well, first of all, as we know, if people are doing the true strengths, they're much more likely to be happy and engaged in the company. And then we can get them the right seats, once again, and I'll go back to that again. We get them the place, things. Often people are in their roles and their jobs and they hate what they're doing because they're not doing their strengths. And so it's not helpful. I mean, the data is really clear on this. You can learn, don't get me wrong, you can learn tactics and you can learn trades, so to speak, right? But how you learn that is going to be based on the way how your talents are, which are you're almost born with, right? And so that's why, once again, even treating two people, I go back to the two companies differently, two people separately could be side by side in inside sales. And you think you can train them the same way. Mm-mm. If they have different strengths, you can't, because they're not, one person might be a better listener while another person needs to, is more focused on achievement. Right. And so you have to do the things to them that's going to resonate with that person to be successful. And then ideally align with the company's goals, right? The department's goals along the same time. But you're not going to connect with the individual unless you understand what their strengths are and how to talk with them and their ways that are making them successful. And that's why I like to do a strengths finder assessment whenever possible, because it provides insights that often they aren't familiar with, or they haven't reconnected with the wild because they've been so focused in the business that they forgot about who they are and what they do and what makes them great.
If you and I took that test today, what would it show about you? Like if you and I were reviewing the strengths finders, what are the things that you're naturally wired towards?
So responsibility is my number one. And what that means is that if I get a task or role responsibility, I have a hard time sleeping at night. It's my word and my bond to make sure that I get it done. One of my problems with responsibility, there's a double-edged sword to all these, is you could have take on too much. And so I have to balance that. So I can't say yes to everything. but responsibility is my number one. My number two is a ranger. This is why I work really good with growing companies, is because I help to see how to arrange people in the right spot on the bus to where they go, and knowing it's going to have to change in the future based on the growth of the company. A 1 million versus a 2 million versus 5 million versus 10 million versus 20 million versus 50 million versus 100 million versus 500 million versus $1 billion company. It's going to have different people seeing the bus. That 5 to 7 people in the executive team are not going to live the whole way through. So anyways, my ranger helps a maximizer. Once again, as you notice, I love to find people's talents and maximize it. That's my number 3. I have self-assurance, which is, I guess, gives me the confidence to do what I do. And individualization. This goes back to, once again, I view people as individuals. I don't view them as a whole team all the time, but I view, if you maximize the talents of the individual, you could help them be a great team. I coached 25 seasons of sport, mostly youth sports. And that was one of my most fun things to do, was finding a person who struggled in one role and help put them to a different role while all of a sudden they're really successful. And the joy they found on the court or the field or where they were at was incredible once all of a sudden they found they could do something great. And so I do the same thing in the corporate world as well.
Yeah. What would you say, like, is an area that you struggle with? So we know some of your strengths, right?
Yeah.
On the flip side, what are some of the weaknesses? You're like, man, it's not me. You need to hire someone else. I need to delegate this out. Like, what do you look at your weaknesses?
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course. And there's many times when this goes back to where there's times when there's specific tactics. So the one area I haven't managed in my career, the only specific department I've never directly managed has been marketing. So what did I invest in the most this year? I put in a 6-figure investment myself, and I put it in sales and marketing, more the marketing side, because it's not my strength. So what happens is often I'll go in, and because I see the whole plan, I see they're working on, and if I could tell that an individual strategy, meaning how they're getting, or a tactic isn't working, that's when I bring in other people. Either they're within my team or they're partners or friends, that they're not friends, so to speak, but people who I know that can work with them. I bring them in because I'm like, okay, this tactic or strategy isn't working. So let's bring in a professional that this is what they do all the time. Right. And so yeah, there's a lot. Holy cow. There's so much I don't know. Right. And how, what do they say? I read this the other day. It's over 100, it's like 800,000 books a year is published. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? The amount of information that's out there. So to think that we can know all things is silly, and it's foolish, and it's arrogant. And so whenever we could bring in, when we can't hire the talent, let's hire fractional talent to come in and solve a specific problem. And they don't have to be there forever. Right. Yeah. They could be that, they could be that quick assist person or quick point person just to deal with something. And then great. They go on their way. They're happy. You're happy. They solved their problem. We've solved our problem, and we move forward. So I do that regularly. Because I can't do everything. I don't have the time to do that with I'm working with 2 different clients, 2 different people, and I can't get indwelt in every single detail, right? That happens with the company. And so I have to bring in great talent when that takes place.
What's a unique talent or skill or some experience that many people don't know about you? Like, it's kind of like, maybe it's a unique hidden thing that you don't talk much about.
Good question.
We could come back to it if you need to.
No, I guess something that hasn't been said beforehand is, I grew up, with nothing. I grew up with I was on food, we had food stamps growing up. We had free and reduced lunch tickets going to school. We never had a nice car growing up. My dad wasn't with me through most of my life. We had drugs, alcohol, and abuse, going through when I was growing up. But I was fortunate to have great advice and people along the way that helped give me guidance to do the right things. And so I guess when people wonder, can I help them? It's like, well, I at 14 years old, I was living alone while my mom was working a tugboat in Alaska. All my siblings were gone. And there would be time for people to come in from time to time, but I would cook and I'd clean. And I'd find a way to get myself to the sporting event that was nearby. So I guess the talent is I think people, regardless of their background, regardless of who they are, can do extraordinary things if they are committed to getting it done. And so I've had the struggle. That's why I like the 40 strategy. You know, I had and so I guess that's that, if you may, is that I've had to fire 200 people, families beforehand. That's the worst thing. One of the worst things that ever happened in my career. This is a dot-com bubble. Those who remember that back in 2000, when a lot of people lost their jobs. And I had after I found out I got to keep my job, my reward was handing out the paychecks to the families who were going to be gone. And that's humbling. And I think there's a lot of people who have not been humbled, and there was a period in my career I wasn't either, but I have been now. And so I've seen the good, and I've been fortunate that the vast majority of my experiences have gone extraordinarily well. But I've also dealt with the super hard difficulties of pain, suffering, death, literally, had a VP of sales who passed away of melanoma cancer. I mean, I've seen the real things that happen. And so I guess that's, if you may, is a secret sauce of like, this is real life. And as much as we like to separate work and personal, they're all together.
Yeah.
They're all one thing. And I think I could just provide, I've been the number 2 with companies going back to 97, right? 98, I guess it was. And so I've consistently have been, and then I've been the times when I've been the only guy, so to speak, where I was the CEO. And, you learn from that. And so having this consistent experience of being there just gives me understanding. And I also have a really strong financial acumen because that's where I came from. And then operations and lean. And so anyways, I gave you a long answer there, but I guess it's just empathy and understanding. It's funny. I'm not really an empathetic guy. That's the weird part. I'm really not. It's actually 33 out of 34 on my strength. I'm just looking at it right now. But I'm good at understanding where to make people successful.
Yeah.
And that's why I do what I do. And it's right where I don't care about, where I really lack empathy, is when people don't want to move. I mean, Josh, if you want to get me like where I'll resign myself from a engagement is like when they're not willing to move forward.
Yeah.
It's like I'm the right guy. I'm about helping people to be great, helping organizations to be great. I'm not about
convincing them to be great.
Well, sometimes there's a bit of convincing, because sometimes, if you'd have told me that a kid who had a divorced father, had drugs in their family, there was abuse in the family, was going to be a successful businessman one day, we need the people in our lives to give us confidence.
True.
So that's something that's real, and I can help give people confidence. But I give people confidence by creating a clear plan and something that we can work at, and we can help hold each other accountable to getting them done, as opposed to just saying, I know this and I got it figured out. It's like, I don't know. You have to go into each company and learn, because you don't know.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to give you a challenge here. So I used to ask this question a lot. I still do, but I used to too, is if you could go back and give your younger self a piece of advice, right? So you're 14 years old, you're kind of living on your own, mom's off on a tugboat. Dad is who knows where. And you've met a lot of challenges in your life, struggling, right? 14-year-old kid shouldn't have that kind of responsibility, which kind of turned into your superpower later on. But you get to go do something for your 14-year-old self. You don't know it's the future self doing it, but you get to do one small thing for the 14-year-old kid to give a lift up. What would you do for the guy back then?
So I was really, really lucky when I was being a very unsuccessful intern at a small company at the University of Washington for a company that was, I got the internship. I had a gentleman named Steve Fast. He had a company called Fast Utility Refund Service, and he hired me. And I remember him kept saying, "Carl, you're not really you're not meeting my expectations," but I learned a lot from him, even though I wasn't very helpful for him.
Yeah.
And he gave me a Zig Ziglar set of tapes. And those, remember the cassette tapes, those are been, old enough to remember. He gave me this set of Zig Ziglar tapes. It was like 16 cassette tapes. And I went to school at University of Washington. I grew up down in the Portland area in Oregon. And I used to drive back and forth and listen to those tapes. And I was so fortunate to get that at 19, 20 years old. Right. And so the advice, if I would have given him earlier, would have been what something that Zig Ziglar says, is to be a great leader, you have to be a great reader. And that's the advice. We have to have a learning growth mindset, and we get that by continuously reading and continuously learning new things.
So if you could give yourself a gift, right? The Carl Cox of today, we could go back in time and you get to give your 14-year-old kid yourself a gift. What would that gift be? So you can't be Zig Ziglar tapes because you're going to get that when you're 19, but you get a gift. What gift do you think would have changed your world earlier?
You mean like a physical gift or could be any gift?
Hey, buddy, you get to choose.
It'd be belief. It'd be belief. It's all of us. I don't, by the way, and this, Josh, we could be on quote unquote a CEO on top of the world and we could still lack confidence in things.
Yeah. That's what my journal says every day.
Exactly. So I think the gift would be a gift. I go back to having a gift of confidence. One of our mutual friends, we have a Scott Ballard, and great guy. And if, anyways, if you're out there in the world, that's a shameless plug for Scott Ballard, who has had a significant and positive impact on both of our lives. But it would be the gift of confidence.
Yeah.
Is helping to give that to somebody when they're young.
Yeah, that guy, I was at a dark spot and he just said, Josh, I believe in you. Like, you got this, man. I believe in you. I'm not going to be surprised when you achieve. Like, you got this. And he just gives you that confidence, right? So that belief to a 14-year-old kid, wow, that the same thing given to me as a 14-year-old kid would have done some major changes, probably a few less scars, a few less difficulties times. So Carl, as you're building and you're helping successful companies, right? You went from, food stamps and living on your own and kind of getting the crap of life kicked out of you with abuse and all that other stuff. What was the hardest thing that you had to transition as you became more and more successful, right? You get a few more zeros in the bank, another comma here, another business, another exit, another ESOP, all these things. What was the hardest thing that had to happen in your own life?
I think the hardest thing is, as you're maturing, is to let go. There's going to be things that you are actually better at doing than people on your team. But the value of that task or activity is lower than the value that you contribute to make a difference in guiding the company. Mm. And so it's to having the humility and the graciousness to allow people to learn who are working with you so they can get better at what they're doing. And for us to have, give them the confidence to do that task or role. And once again, you can probably do it better in some cases. This is not all cases. You could probably do it better, but helping them and guiding them and listening to them and not hammering them. I remember there was a time, there was a gentleman I work with, great person. I won't name him just because I won't name him at the moment, but he knows he is. But he made a mistake one time, and it was what it was. For him, this was horrible. He felt like he made the unforgivable sin. And I remember I listened to him, and he was kind of upset because I wasn't yelling at him. I wasn't hammering him for making an error, like that was going to fix it. I said, I'll just say Tom, for lack of a better term. Okay, Tom, I didn't hire you to berate you. I hired you to learn. And I hired you, and this mistake you learned, I know now, by the way, how this has happened, you won't make this mistake again because you feel how bad it is when you made this mistake. So I know next time you're going to review your work and you're going to set up a process control to take place. Do you agree with that? And this is in a common tone. This is not yelling at him, even though he wanted to be yelled at, but that's not healthy, right? it's not healthy to get that. Now, I'm not saying we don't all need a kick in the butt sometimes, we don't, so to speak, we don't need some correction, but there's times where I'm still correcting him, but I'm doing it in a way that was coachable and something that, because I was trying to create trust with him, not a broken trust relationship where it's, that's what so many people we deal with are like yell, and then they're, it's this constant fear and forgiveness thing that's going on. And often the forgiveness never happens. I'd much rather forgive first so we can get rid of the fear and anxiety, and so that we can coach and help them be greater in the future. And so I think that has been something that has been helpful in my career and helping others. And because I had some terrible early experiences with a multinational accounting firm where just the way how they dealt and treated with people was terrible. And I was like, if I could prevent it, I want to avoid myself being like them, because it wasn't healthy.
Yeah. What do you do for fun, Carl?
Good question. I actually, one of my most, our family. So I got 4 kids, wife, and we have, I like games. Interesting enough. I like actually old school board games. If you want a great old school board game, folks, it's a game called Acquire. Okay. It's old school. It's like been around. I found out of this game about 30 years, and it was an old game then. It's literally this game where it's these tiles, and there's hotels do mergers, and you buy and sell shares of stock, and they have to merge and go in with each other. It is, so go ahead and look it up. It's a game called Acquire. Find out, you get one of the older boards, by the way, because the newer board's kind of not as cool. But board games I love. I love sports because I coached it for years and played it when I was younger. And I love watching my kids play sports. 3 of them, well, 2 of them are in college sports right now. And so getting the opportunity to watch them play, that brings great joy. And then when I get a chance, I don't play golf as much as I used to, but it's great to go out in the links a little bit. But how do I say this? I know I'm not the type of guy that wants to play golf every day to become a scratch golfer. I enjoy getting out there. For me, it's a great drug to get away from. I love it when my biggest frustration is I'm slicing the ball. That's not a problem, folks. Okay, sorry. Unless you're a professional golfer, it doesn't matter. And so I've realized once again, when my struggle and pain is unable to hit a golf ball, what a great problem.
What a great problem to have.
Exactly. So anyways, those are the things I do for fun. And but it was like this past weekend, we had Thanksgiving weekend with family. We were together, seeing things, playing some games, watching one of my youngest daughters play a soccer tournament. That brings great joy.
So you and I just have a big deal, go through. We turned around a business, sold it to a strategic buyer, got a big check in the mail. Lots of fun. What kind of thing would you only buy, right? That maybe the 14-year-old, kid that you're looking back, he's like, I want to buy this when I grow up. Like, what would you buy that is just complete, just because we did a really big deal and you want to celebrate?
Oh man, this has been a funny discussion around our house lately. So first of all, I want to make a comment. And I think we know this, the data is pretty clear. Once you make what would be on $65,000, $70,000 a year, you're not going to get any happier. Right. So once you cover your basic expenses and you're able to do basic entertainment, you can't get any happier with any more money. So I am already like, that's where I am with my head space, if that makes sense. But
you're already happy.
That being said, yeah, I am. Exactly. I'm already happy and content. I do say, by the way, to those who get the big paycheck, have another plan. I've heard some super sad stories, and I know that people, actually, I can't tell you how many people I know said they were retiring and they go nuts and then they're coming back. So be thoughtful about your next step.
Yeah.
It's okay to spend a few weeks or even 6 months or a year, but if you're a hunter and you like building things, probably being on the golf course or fishing all the time is not going to do it for you. Mm-hmm. I could be wrong in that. By the way, some people are able to successfully do it, especially the crit community. For me though, I do have a sad story. And which leads to me where I will end up getting sometime there in the near future. My father, his second wife passed away, and so he was trying to find something to do. And he used to have a '57 Corvette, red Corvette that he used to race.
Stingray?
Yes. and it was incredible looking. And I never really saw it run much, honestly, because I used to race it when I was
Yeah.
tiny. So anyways, I was supposed to get Corvette. That was kind of the deal. So I was one was going to get Corvette. And so when Second West passed away, I was hopeful that this would be a way for him to pass time, because he used to work on cars all the time when he was younger, to get it working again. Unfortunately, I didn't know he was an early stage Alzheimer's that time. And so it was sitting in his Florida garage. It way overstressed him. I came back on the next visit. I was like, Dad, where's the Corvette? He's like, it's gone. I sold it. And it sold for like basically nothing. I found out later on it was like one of 500 Corvettes of this particular model.
Yeah.
So that's my sad story. So sorry, this is my one shameless thing, and is I'm gonna get most likely, and I could change, but most likely I'm gonna get one of those audacious Porsche 911s, candy apple red. Low whale tail on it, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm going to get it manual. I know, because that's what's fun. I have my first non-manual car in a while. It's a great, little vehicle, but I enjoy driving. And so that's my crazy little thing for me. I know for others, like, oh, I've had 6 of these and stuff like that. That's fine. But for me, this will be a big deal. It'll be hard for me because it won't be a humble vehicle, driving around in a candy apple red Corvette, but it'll be the one thing. And I'm not doing this, by the way, because I've made it or whatnot. I'm doing it because it's been a passion ever since that red Corvette's gone away, when I was a younger man. And so, or actually when I was a kid, I've been wanting to drive that since I've been 6 years old. So,
yeah. Well, when you get that, you could drive it to Florida, and we'll go out and we'll hang out for a bit. And we'll maybe play a board game together, get the family together, play a board game.
Well, the problem is we start playing choir, we're not going to go on driving the car because you're going to have so much fun.
There you go. Hey, what question during this interview should I have asked you about business, about your life, about other personal stuff? What should I have asked you that you wish I did?
It's funny. I ask that question too a lot of times, especially in an interview. What's the one question I should ask you? Perhaps, I guess the one question is what drives me.
Go for it.
And I think, for me, what really, really drives me, my passion is, as I said, I grew up in a humble background, and I've also been able to experience a bit of success in my life. And what I love to do is I love to coach and teach. And that is my true passion. That's why I want to, our goal that we have at 40 Strategy is to impact 1 million people, 10,000 organizations, and at least 100 of them directly over the next decade. And through that, we give the first 10% of our net revenues to charity. So our goal is to give at least over $1 million over the next decade. And so what gets me fired up, excited, and why I'm willing to share my story is because I'm hoping to, once again, influence and making a difference, and hopefully teach people things that they aren't aware of and give them confidence to do it, but also give to those who are in need. And so, it's been a great joy. These 4 organizations that we work with do an amazing job of what they do. And, but like Opportunity International is a group that they help do microloans internationally, and in Africa, primarily, as a lot of them in other third world countries. And so we did a sponsorship. Now, one of the most neat things, Josh, of this little goal that we have to give a little bit of money is a person I was working with, when I mentioned him the seed of, I give, and that's a goal of mine. It's one of the primary purposes why I wake up each day. It was really cool. They were like, Carl, I'm going to give you inspire me so much. I'm going to give $5 million. So what's fun is sometimes we don't realize those little seeds we plant and those little sharing of knowledge inspires somebody else to do something that they were never thinking of doing. And the joy, and this is the part that, Josh, I didn't recognize. And I kind of know this, but it's not the purpose. But when we give more, we get more, way more back in return than we ever deserve. And that's the humbling part behind this, is it's so gratifying, right, to see the difference we can make in the world. But it's amazing how, I don't have to advertise, so to speak, in business, because referrals come my way. And that's how we like to do things. We want people to be referred of how we make a difference. And so that's probably the bigger mission part behind what we do, and what really helps us to every day make a difference with our clients, so they can accomplish what they're trying to do.
That's very cool. So Carl, for people listening, where's a good place for people to connect with you and do a deal with you?
Yeah, I encourage them to reach out to our website just to learn some basic information, 40strategy.com. That's 40strategy.com. And if you want to send an email, our company email is catch, like catching a ball, at 40strategy.com. And please send me an email. Love to chat with you if you have any questions, guidance, or thoughts, and love to hear from you.
Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, listening in to the Deal Scout, this show is about deals and deal makers, right? Before we could do deals with people, we got to know that we know, like, and trust them. And, this show, the purpose is to put people and deals together and to talk about deals and talk about the deal makers, the struggles, the things that we go through as deal makers. So I hope you're enjoying this. If you're working on a deal or would like to learn more about a specific type of deal, head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, maybe get you on the show, talk about your story, talk about the deals that you're working on and the kind of things that you like to build. So head on over there, reach out to our guests, reach out to Carl and say, thanks for being on the show. Find a way to do a deal with them, support them, or be a part of the mission that they're working on. And thank you for being a part of this community. Hope you guys are having a great day. Talk to you all on the next episode. Bye, everybody.